do believe that one of the paths to enlightenment is through service to others. You find yourself by reflecting yourself through other people. And there is a really great sense of outreach that is in the church.
Sure.
So I think people see God in
Mm-hmm.
whatever expression that is for you
Mm-hmm.
in the church, while unfortunately attributing it to Joseph Smith's version of what God and Jesus would be,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back, or welcome to my channel. If this is your first time, I am back with another interview video for the series, the podcast video series I've been doing of religion to occult interviews, where I interview people who grew up religious in whatever religion that may be, and are now into the occult in some shape or fashion, whatever capacity that how their beliefs have changed over time, and a chance for people to tell their stories, share their stories with my viewers and with me, and in hopes of inspiring others who are also on a similar spiritual journey or wherever you are, and just for a chance to hold some space for people to be authentic and share their experience. So today I'm here with my good friend Snow. So Snow, yeah, say something, let the camera pick you up. I think it'll zoom is weird. So
Oh, okay. Yeah. No. Hi, my name's Snow. Yeah, I was raised Mormon. I left my parents' household when I was about 18 to 20, depending on what kind of math we want to use. And yeah, I'm excited to be here.
yeah, cool, awesome, yeah, sweet. Well, we'll get right into it. So you just basically answered the first question of what religion you grew up in, which is cool. But do you wanna expand on that a little bit? So you were raised Mormon. Were you like super strict Mormon, or like what is the Mormon upbringing like?
Yeah, so there's definitely two types of Mormon. There's definitely the ones who are very strict, rule-abiding Mormons. They're kind of I would say, the more cookie cutter ones
Mm-hmm.
that you see. My parents were definitely a little bit lazy about it. And there was actually a brief stint where we were Southern Baptist. So my mother was actually excommunicated from the Mormon Church
Oh my god.
for a couple years, and we were Southern Baptist until the preacher basically used Jesus's crucifixion at Easter to ask for money for the new parking garage the church was building.
Oh my god.
So, yeah, and then we went back to being Mormon, and thankfully, I was never baptized in any faith. I still have one
Okay.
foot in the fire, but that doesn't impede the upbringing that I was definitely subjected to
Yeah.
through it.
So really quick, why was your mom excommunicated from?
Yeah, so she married my dad, who's actually my second stepfather.
Okay.
But she married him when I was 7, and he moved into the home before the marriage. So she was basically committing adultery, and they burned her records and basically erased any record of her existence in the church.
Oh,
And she had to eventually like beg to come back, and they had her scrubbing like toilets and the floorboards to like show her righteousness essentially, and like
wow.
that she could earn her place back in the church.
Jeez. Oh my
Yeah,
God. Wow.
yeah.
That's pretty wild. And so how long did she have to we'll turn it back to you in a sec, but how long did she like scrub floorboards for before being allowed back?
I want to say like we were able to go to the church and
Hmm.
like still be there, but during that time, like when we went back, it was like a year or two, from what I remember.
Hmm.
And then they basically like they guilted her into playing the piano as well.
Mm.
But my father is military, So they were essentially asking her to be up at all the services playing piano while
Mm-hmm.
she had three children at home.
Mm.
Or like not at home, they were in the pews, but still,
Right,
like,
right, yeah.
who's watching the kids?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So,
Yeah.
did you go to like Mormon school too, or was it just sort of church or private school? Was that
So
side at all?
yeah, so there's not many. I was grew up in Georgia, so there's
Okay.
not many like Mormon schools down there because it's very Baptist.
Hmm.
I did go to Sunday school and things like that, and then in high school, Mormon teenagers are expected to go to what's called seminary.
Mm.
So I would wake up every day before school at like 5:30 in the morning to
Mm.
be able to go to church at 6 and have Bible study for an hour, hour and a half, where we learned about the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Book of Mormon, and then something the viewers probably haven't heard about. It's called the Pearl of Great Price,
Mm.
which is essentially an addendum that Joseph Smith wrote after the Book of Mormon.
Mm.
And a lot of that is where some of the weird, like, polyamory Mormons arrived in America on submarines type stuff comes from.
Weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know anything about that.
Mhm.
Are you able to dive into just sort of a synopsis of that book further, aside from like the submarines and stuff?
A, a little bit. So basically, he uses it as kind of um, a way to think of it as like the Bill of Rights to the
Okay.
Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like his, oh, hey, by the way, these are kind of the things that we're thinking of. It's hard. I don't remember many of the specifics because it has been about 16, 17 years at this point, which is
Yeah.
awful to say and date
No.
yourself. But it is essentially where a lot of his rulings came towards his community back in the 1860s when Mormonism first kind of came around.
Mm.
So it's where like tithing, I want to say, was implemented in that, which is where every member of the Mormon Church has to give 10% of everything they earn. Even if somebody were to give them $20 on the street, you
Mm.
need to give $2 to the church.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah, and so it's one of the ways, in my opinion, that the church is able to retain control over its members because it does for the lower income people who are the people who need that community of church and
Mm.
service.
Mm.
It's helping keep them in that place where they're going to be dependent on some of the church's services.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, so essentially, the Pearl of Great Price is kind of where a lot of the more strict rules come from, but also where a little bit of the sillier beliefs in terms of how um, Jesus came to America, which is a core belief in Mormonism.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it also is kind of where it beats down on people of color, things like that.
Mm.
It does get a little racist at points. I don't know if it's been edited at this point. There's been a lot of hubbub over recent years, but
Sure.
yes.
Yeah. Wow. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, I'm curious to know more about the Jesus coming to America and stuff. We might get to it a little bit later. But
Yeah.
so did you ever, while you were growing up in this at Mormon, while you were
Mhm.
growing up Mormon, did you ever like truly believe any of the teachings of the church?
No.
No. Okay.
There's somehow, yeah, there was never a part of me that really believed. There was a part that wanted to believe, that
Mhm.
wanted to feel whatever it is that everybody else is talking about. And I did
Sure.
try to go through some of the motions, but yeah, it really just never latched on to me. I did have some pretty traumatic events that happened to me outside of the church,
Mhm.
around like the age of 7 to 8. So
Mhm.
like that can do a lot to shake your faith in like an all-loving God that you're being taught about.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was never anything that latched on.
Mm.
I have always seen the benefits of community, as I keep saying, but No, no,
No.
no beliefs in Sky Daddy.
Okay. Yeah, Sky Daddy. That's perfect. Do you believe do you think, that being said, do you think that other individuals find true spiritual fulfillment in the church there?
So from my other beliefs that I have, um, I do believe that one of the paths to enlightenment is through service to others. You find yourself by reflecting yourself through other people. And there is a really great sense of outreach that is in the church. Unfortunately, it is under the guise of getting more members
Mm.
and trying to proselytize, if that's the right word, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Proselytize,
Yes, yeah, I like have it in my
proselytize.
head, but of course it's not something you ever say out loud.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's like in the guise of getting people to come to into the church. But that doesn't diminish the fact that you are helping people who do need help and you are going out into these communities and doing XYZ.
Sure.
So I think people see God in
Mm-hmm.
whatever expression that is for you
Mm-hmm.
in the church, while unfortunately attributing it to Joseph Smith's version of what God and Jesus would be,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. There's like an ulterior motive to this,
Exactly.
but yeah.
Yeah, because like you can't really drop into that feeling,
Yeah.
when you've got that knowledge of like, oh, well, we really need to get them to come on Sundays so we can, make sure their
Right.
whole family comes next time.
Yeah.
Uh, but I feel like if you drop that from yourself and you can allow yourself to sink into the service,
Mm-hmm.
there's inevitably going to be some really big fulfillment
Sure.
feelings.
Yeah.
And especially too, if you're a lonely person that comes into the
Mm.
community, which is, I've brought that up a couple times, but I'm very certain that's how my mother got roped in, is because her father had passed when she was 16. And
Mm.
the church approached her a couple months later and was like, hey,
Mm.
you should come.
Mm.
And she was able to find friendship
Yeah.
in a time of need. I mean,
Yeah.
for sure, we need it wherever we can get it, but
Right. Yeah. And that's the main thing I hear from like basically everyone that I've done an interview with so far. Oh, I just dropped my ring. Um, is that, hold on, let me just get that. Is that the community of the church was like probably the best part, like
yeah.
yeah, like there's always a community there. And that for me too. Like my experience going to church, like I grew up Anglican, like Episcopalian, and I loved the people that I went, not all of them, but I had some of my favorite people that I went to church with, and like that's why I would get excited to go to church on Sundays, is to see these people. It was never because I was excited to worship God. Um at church anyways,
Hmm.
but yeah, but that community aspect is really compelling to a lot of people, and they do offer that to people that need it, at times too.
Yeah, and it's tough though too, because a lot of the religions do isolate, or at least a lot of the more cultish ones. Unfortunately, Mormon does fall into that.
Mm-hmm.
So the more you're telling people they can't hang out with the others,
Mm.
the more they'll find that source and community as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a tough thing to wrap your head around as
Yeah.
you're exiting the church too. You kind of have to
Sure.
unravel what each experience meant sometimes.
So the Mormon Church does sort of state that you shouldn't like congregate or hang out with people outside of that religion.
They definitely like it, they definitely don't want you doing certain things. Like you can't be going to see certain movies, like R-rated movies for sure, PG-13 are frowned upon. Yeah, like silly stuff like that. They don't want you going to see like intense music because it like comes out, it does the like, it brings out those feelings.
Mm.
You know, there are some rules that have been stated, but they're not so explicit.
Yeah.
um but there is the internal pressure,
Mm.
and the church does set themselves up to where, like, you know, you have church on Sunday, but you know, we've got women's group on Wednesdays, and we've got men's group on Tuesdays, and we've got the community potluck on Thursdays, and on Fridays, like, we're going to come out and clean the church.
Mm-hmm.
So they do find ways to, again, congregate you,
Yeah.
and like put that pressure on, because they do feel if you're not coming to those events, you're not very devout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of making you busy, keeping you busy. So
Yeah, putting the pressure on for sure.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Interesting. I mean, and they do have that for like other churches too, but
Mhm.
and I'm sure I'm not the only one, like as far as viewers that, I mean, I don't have any Mormon experience, but you know, what comes to mind, of course, which I haven't even watched it, is that the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
Yeah, I get told to watch that all the
Yeah,
time.
I mean, don't. I think I watched like one episode and it was weird. Like it was okay. I don't know. Like I know a lot of people are big fans, but I'm like, okay, they're not. They probably should have been excommunicated from the church. I don't, with what shenanigans they were doing. I don't know. So
From what I've heard, I feel like I'm like, there's either this is like actively a show like sponsored by the Mormon Church to like
mm,
show that Mormons are hip and cool and like
mm,
we've got edge to us,
right.
or like the studio's just using the word Mormon, because like from what people have told
Right.
me, I'm like, yo, like my mother did a lot less than
Yeah.
this, you know, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it didn't seem, from what the little I know of Mormon, I was like, where's the Mormon part of this, you know? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
just the garments they're wearing and the fact they're in Salt Lake, probably.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, and again, I didn't watch the whole thing, so I don't have much context to speak on, but, you know, it's just a weird thing. Not the
Yeah,
definition of Mormonism, for sure.
yeah.
So were there ever any extreme practices in the religion that you witnessed or saw? Well, I guess it's the same thing.
Hmm. That's a good question. I feel like because I was never baptized and we were excommunicated for a little bit, there weren't anything necessarily extreme that I saw, other than I feel like the excommunication,
Right, that is
which
pretty
is
extreme. Yeah.
pretty freaking extreme, you
Yeah.
know. But I one instance that comes to mind is there is a concept called the temple in Mormon culture. So, like, when you see those giant buildings, those ornate buildings with the golden statues with the horn, that's of the angel Moroni, by the way.
Moroni. Okay.
Moroni is who visited Joseph Smith and gave him the knowledge
Ah,
of the church in a vision, basically.
okay.
But those are called the temple, and you go there to get married, to do baptisms for the dead, which is where they will baptize living people in a proxy
Hmm.
for those who have died and weren't Mormon. That way you can go to heaven even though
Hmm.
you weren't a believer. So
Interesting.
it's a little weird. It's a little like kind of consent kind of thing too.
Yeah.
But the reason I bring this up is they do these very secretive ceremonies, and like you have to really search for videos of this, because like you have to hide cameras and stuff like that if you ever want to go it.
Mm.
And when I asked my mother about it, she will not tell me. She's like, it's sacred. I cannot talk about it.
Oh
And I'm like,
wow.
well, so it's a secret. And they're like, no, it's sacred. It's different.
It, not
Tomato,
really.
tomato, you know,
Yeah, it's
like,
basically the same word.
yeah, but they like will wear these green aprons, and like they have a different name that Mormons will go by in the temple. It's like their true name is what they call it.
Hmm.
Like they do a devotion ceremony where they literally will pantomime like slitting their own throat and their heart open
Oh my
for
God.
like God. Yeah, it's a very they like show a creation video too that's like acted out by like actual people that shows like Adam and Eve and the temptation of Satan and like
Hmm.
kind of hints that women aren't as great as men, which is a pretty core mechanic of Mormonism.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's a very strange kind of thing. A lot of idolatry, a lot of like,
Hmm.
there's literally a font where they do the baptisms that's on a circle of golden calves,
Oh my God.
which is like quite literally like a bad thing in the Bible from what I
Right.
remember from seminary.
It's very ritualistic, it sounds
It
like.
is. And
Yeah.
it's funny because Mormons hate Catholics. And
Mm.
it's like, you guys have so much in common.
Right. Yeah. Huh. That's so bizarre. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So how did you come about that knowledge? Did you Google just from your, well, not from your mom, I guess.
Well, yeah. So everybody knows of the existence of the temple, but yeah. So like I did a little diving, and there's a guy. Oh gosh, I wish I could remember his name for you, but it's like a something something Rick or something. It's like two
Okay.
names and then they're like two words and then the actual name. But
Okay.
he is an ex-Mormon who has been, I don't think he's quite been discovered
Mm-hmm.
that he's not believing anymore, but he's using it to expose the church and is like hiding cameras inside of his robes that he's wearing. That way he
Whoa.
can get inside the secret areas and actually get there.
Nice.
Um, and there's a woman as well. I'll actually look this up for your
Yeah.
viewers really quick too.
Sure.
Um, she is getting big on Instagram right now.
Mm-hmm.
And she has essentially been exposing what goes on in the church
Mm.
because she has recently left.
Okay.
So there are creators that you can find. Her name is Alyssa D. Grenfell. So Grenfell.
Okay.
And she has been making some excellent content on Instagram
Mm-hmm.
about the Mormon Church and from a firsthand experience as well,
Mm-hmm.
because she has gone through the temple,
Mm.
the Mormon marriage, where she's tied explicitly to her husband.
Yeah.
And as well for Mormon marriages, if you're not a Mormon, you're not allowed. So like
Mm.
if
Mm-hmm.
you have people you care about who aren't in the church, they're just not coming to your wedding.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man. Okay.
Hmm.
So it's not even just like you can't marry someone not Mormon. Like they can't even come to the wedding. Like,
Yes. And if you marry somebody who is not Mormon, you're automatically not getting to the highest tier of heaven, which
mm,
there is a tier system for heaven in the Mormon belief.
really? How many different
Yes.
tiers are there?
So there's essentially three. So
Okay.
there's the terrestrial, uh, there's the terrestrial, the celestial, and something else. But essentially, so there's the bottom level, which is hell.
Okay.
Essentially, it's like a purgatory. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily burning fire and everything, but you're lost, you're sad, you're whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the terrestrial kingdom, which is going to be essentially Earth,
Okay. Yeah,
but
that's what it sounds. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
exactly. But essentially Earth, where you are wandering around and maybe you did some things, like you did believe you were Mormon, but like you didn't get the marriage, or like, some couple steps happened,
Yeah.
but you're still there. But to get to the celestial kingdom, you
Mm-hmm.
have to do the marriage, the service, the
Mm,
holding your position. You have to be in the highest regard in the Mormon church, essentially.
interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
Huh.
Mhm.
It's so it kind of makes me think of like the terrestrial, is that right? Like level.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
it makes me think of like ghosts, like like when you die and you're like a ghost, like you're gonna still be sort of bound to the earth to some extent. I mean, maybe this is not true. This is just what I was like thinking of when you were talking.
Mhm.
Too. It's just it makes it just seem like a lower frequency, perhaps.
Yes, and I just
Lower
looked it
vibration.
up too. So the bottom is the telestial,
Telestial. Okay.
telestial, and then the
Telestial.
middle is terrestrial,
Okay.
and then the top is celestial, and they're the three kingdoms of glory, essentially.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah, and so depending on our obedience of the commandments,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Huh. What were the best and worst things about your religious upbringing?
You know, I will say that Mormons are really freaking polite, man.
Hmm.
Like, they are outside of the really kooky beliefs and the sometimes inherent racism and sexism. They do try to treat people with respect and really do follow the golden rule.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like there are a lot of parts of me that come from that upbringing of kind of being a little bit more calm, a little bit
Mm.
more like reserved. So I do appreciate that. Uh, the worst parts, though, were the belief systems it put in place for my parents.
Mm.
Because my mother is my biological mother.
Mm-hmm.
And so she married my father in.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the way the church teaches you, you basically default to the man in
Mm.
all circumstances.
Yeah.
Um, so my father ended up becoming incredibly abusive after a point.
Mm.
He had PTSD from the military and also unresolved trauma. You know, like how many of our parents that are boomers really did the work, you
Yeah.
know?
Right.
So, but he came in basically at 7 years old and started ruling with a very heavy fist.
Mm.
And because of what the Mormon taught my mother, she
Mm.
just let it happen.
Mm.
So it kind of took away the independence and the fire that I could see inside of my mother and that innate excellence that just was
Mm.
inside of her
Yeah.
and really beat it down,
Mm.
which I've seen in so many women. I had a friend growing up who was the daughter of the pastor of my church,
Mm.
who did attempt suicide multiple times
Mm.
just in the few years I knew her,
Mm.
because of the level of pressure and things that happened. Um,
Yeah.
there is also, this is nothing that happened to me, but it is worth mentioning because it's one of the darker sides of Mormonism nobody talks about.
Yeah.
Um, they will do purity checks on the women and the young girls, where they will actually, the pastor will bring them into the office and will talk to them like, are you sexually active? Are you thinking about boys? Do you masturbate? And there are reports of them manually feeling to see if their hymen is in check,
That's where I
to
thought
make
you were
sure.
going with that. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
So, you know,
Wow.
it is one thing. I do have two sisters, and unfortunately, I'm estranged from my family because of who they are. And it is my greatest concern, I feel like, about the church is their it's a white straight men's club is what the Mormon
Mm.
church is. You know,
Mm.
they black people couldn't even hold office until the late 70s,
Right.
when God gave revelation that it'll be cool. Like, uh, I thought God was all knowing, guys. Shouldn't you
Right.
guys have been on like the cutting edge of civil rights?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, if like the logic is tracking.
Mm. Man, that's how are your sisters still part of the church?
Last I spoke to my parents, they
Mm-hmm.
are no longer in the church.
Okay.
So I think when I was around 24, 25,
Mm-hmm.
my mother and I were having a call. This was before I cut things off with them.
Yeah.
And she would not tell me why. She refused to tell me why.
Mm-hmm.
But she was just like, my faith has been shook in the church and
Mm.
I can no longer associate with it. Now, my parents are Trumpers and they're very much like into Fox News. So it's very shocking to hear that they changed their mind
Yeah.
because I've never been able to get through to them about anything.
Yeah.
So it does beg the question, what the hell happened?
Yeah.
So
Totally.
yeah, I have no idea currently. It's been a few years since I've talked to my parents.
Mm.
Uh, but I wouldn't doubt if one of my older sister was still in it. I could see her being sucked into a cult really easily.
Yeah.
She's just one of those people.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe one day, she'll feel compelled to share, and if not, then it's open to speculation. But that's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. So, okay, so kind of getting more so into like your spiritual beliefs now, kind of back it up a little bit and start at the beginning. So, do you consider yourself like okay, no, let me actually start somewhere. So how somewhere else. How do you consider your spiritual beliefs now, if any?
Yeah, so it's interesting. If you had asked me this question a week ago, I probably would have had a lot different answer. I've had
Really?
some
Okay.
pretty profound experiences in the past week that have really reopened my eyes
I
to
love that.
the occult and things like that. But yeah, I feel like when I was a teenager,
Hmm.
okay, let's back up.
Yeah,
Let's go
yeah,
to the beginning. Yeah.
sure.
So, even as a kid, I've always felt that I was a really kind of more a wiser kind of child. Like it just kind of felt like I knew kind of things that were going on. I was really empathetic. I already felt kind of a devotion to other people
Hmm.
as a young child, that that's kind of what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
And it was something that my parents were very much against and like kind of almost like beat out of me, figuratively and literally.
Yeah.
And so like there was almost like a little bit of angst that kind of happened.
Hmm.
But around like 15 or 16, like I started becoming really curious and started reading a lot. I remember first I ended up reading the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey,
Okay.
um, which is a great read, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Arguably, Anton LaVey is not a great person, but
Yeah.
for a person that's coming out of religion, especially like Christian religions, I
Hmm.
do think it's a good book to kind of snap your brain a little bit to be like, oh, like maybe I should live for me.
Yeah.
Like there's truth in all things.
Right.
So I kind of read into that. I started delving into kind of Wicca a little bit as well. I felt a little bit of a pull towards earth magic.
Hmm.
I am Irish and Cherokee, so
Okay.
there is a lot of that like of the earth kind of energy in my bloodline.
Yeah.
Uh, but I ended up living in Colorado with some men we were drawn to each other because of our spiritual beliefs. They we were kind of learning together, but I quickly realized that they were using their spirituality as a way to prey on women, uh,
Uh,
which is a very big problem in
yeah.
this kind of community. So, for quite a few years, I've been turned off from the idea.
Hmm.
And I think it was more just an anger at them.
Yeah.
Um, but in the past few weeks, there's definitely been a growth and kind of that faith in, spirituality in the universe and alignment, past lives, things like that.
Hmm.
Um, so I think Mormonism has given me an openness to all beliefs,
Hmm.
because Mormonism is pretty kooky at times.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You kind of answered one of my questions, like without me even asking about just how you were as a child and
Mm,
everything, and that like sort of empathic energy that you mentioned, and I can relate to that too. I was very empathic to like animals and people, and I would build fairy. I mean, I still sometimes build fairy houses, but I would build fairy houses and like very in tune with the elements and my parents weren't super supportive of the whole like psychicism as a kid, because there would be times that I knew things and like I was like, oh, we're gonna see this person here, like I feel, and then we'd see that person, and my dad was like, "There's no way you knew that." And I'm like, "What do you mean? I just here we are.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
I knew it. You know, I don't know how." Um, but yeah, and then so as okay, so what impression did the Satanic Bible leave on you? Like what compelled you to sort of read that?
Because it was the edgiest thing that I could find compared to the Bible, to the
Yeah.
Bible. I mean, to be quite honest, yeah,
Yeah.
like after a certain point, like you're 15, that testosterone is going, puberty is firing. You got to get that angsty cycle in. And yeah, that's what it was. And I remember, this is like the cringiest thing, but I would like leave it on my desk at school. So to be like, people would have to talk to me about it and things like that. Like, but it really kind of was a way for me to try to show out and try to
Yeah.
stand out from everybody else in my high school.
Mhm.
Um, but it does have a lot of do no harm but take no shit kind of mentality of,
Mhm.
you can do whatever you want, but the
Mhm.
second that you infringe on another person,
Mhm.
that's a no-go.
Yeah.
And growing up in the South, consent is not a conversation that happens.
Right.
And it's kind of interesting that one of the first introductions to explicitly what consent is was the Satanic Bible.
Yeah, really. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I went to there's a satanic temple in Salem,
Hmm.
Massachusetts, which is a really cool place to visit if you haven't been yet.
I
And
haven't.
I went there. Also an art museum. So we went like for the museum, and people are like, I mean, I didn't think that Satanism, or I've evolved past the belief that that's like evil, and they're all just terrible people and stuff. They're all very friendly, and it really is more about taking back your own power and like
Hmm.
having. I haven't read the Satanic Bible, so I don't know the language that they use, but but in the occult too, like, and in just ceremonial magic and stuff that I practice, like, it's all about, and like in Thelema and stuff, it's all about like your will,
Hmm.
like your will, and perhaps being aligned with God's will. But like in the church, and maybe in the Mormon Church too, they teach you that like God is outside of yourself, right? And not
Hmm.
within yourself. And like all power comes from God. And, ultimately, like my personal beliefs have evolved to the point where like I our power is within us. And maybe
Hmm.
there's but that's because God is within us and not outside of us. And so it's interesting that what you kind of said of the Satanic Bible, seems to just sort of a little bit like align with that truth, because I believe
Yeah.
it's truth. Yeah.
There is actually, so like in this book, it's actually Anton LaVey called it Satanism
Hmm.
to be edgy,
Yeah.
essentially, because he was tired of the not Mormon, but Christian belief system.
Yeah.
And it's more representing an idea and
Hmm.
like you kind of saying that power within
Yeah.
versus a, goat hoofed entity.
Yeah.
Uh, and there is some ceremonial magic in there as well,
Hmm.
like full blown, like black robes, candles, things like that.
Yeah.
But again, it's supposed to be magic that is inherently giving you a new experience, which empowers you and things like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Interesting. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a lot of, of course, like growing up in any church, and probably a lot of people can relate, like there's a lot of unlearning that needs to happen about the perspective of like Satanists
Mhm.
and versus Christians, because ultimately like it's not what you think it is. It's not what
Yeah.
we're taught that it is in church, like, and not that I'm a Satanist, not that you're a Satanist, but like even if we were, it doesn't hold, like that word holds such a weight to it, holds such a
Mhm.
stigma behind it. But the truth is, like, it's not what you think, like
Yeah.
most things are, or aren't what you think. But That's interesting. That I like that, just like leaving that out on your desk for people to see and stuff. Like,
I wanted to be cool so bad back then.
yeah. Well, shit, like that would have been because I went to Catholic high school, so that would have been like snatched up right away. I don't know. Probably would have had to go to confession or something.
Yeah, yeah.
But
No, I went to public school, thankfully, so I could get away with
yeah,
some shenanigans, but
right. Yeah, that helps. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so we got into like your current spiritual beliefs. So, and you kind of already addressed how they've been influenced by your religious upbringing a bit. So how is, I mean, I might already know the answer, but how is like occultism and anything, like how is that viewed by the Mormon Church?
Oh, it's a no.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's pretty explicit. Like any new age religions, things like that are no. Like Mormons are actually kind of snooty about
Mm,
their place in the hierarchy because I mean, the church was literally founded on the idea that they are the one true church.
yeah.
So like they just automatically are like, well, no. I mentioned earlier they explicitly hate Catholics,
Mm,
and I do think it is partially because of that ritualism
mm,
that is a little bit aligned with what they understand of the occult.
yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And the Catholic Church specifically is full of magic. It's like full of
Yeah,
ceremonial magic and stuff. Uh,
I'm getting a little golden hour
I
glow
know,
right now.
yeah. I was gonna
The
say, 'cause-
angels are here.
yeah, right. They probably
Yeah.
are listening
Yeah,
to
they
this.
probably are. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about Moroni right now.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That
So
guy.
back to that angel. Do you have any context? I'm gonna have to look into that a little bit more. Like, what are the origins of that angel? Do you know?
Yeah, okay. So I might be butchering this and Mormons come into the comments and get mad about this, but so one of the basic history of Mormonism is that Joseph Smith was in a grove praying to find truth because all of these churches were trying to pull him in, and he's like, none of them feel right.
Hmm.
And so in this grove, Moroni and Peter
Hmm.
came down to him and was like, my son, none of the churches are right. We are going to give you the knowledge to create your own church.
Hmm.
Every year for the next 7 years, or once a year for the next 7 years, excuse
Hmm.
me, um, we're going to come visit you and we're going to
Hmm.
teach you.
Hmm.
And within those 7 years, or after those 7 years, we will give you the instructions for this new church that
Hmm.
God wants you to create on this earth.
Hmm.
So after those 7 years, Joseph Smith was led to the top of a hill
Okay.
where he discovered the seer stones underneath and the golden plates.
Okay.
So this is not a joke. The South Park episode about Mormonism is very accurate if you want to
Interesting.
watch it.
Okay.
Yes, because they're actually ex-Mormon, if you didn't know that.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had heard that before.
Yeah. So Joseph Smith literally would put his face inside of a hat with these
Yep.
stones and decode these golden plates. And there's a lot of hubbub. There's a lot of history of where he lost the plates and like God took away the plates because people were asking too many questions and things like that.
Hmm.
So let me just turn this alarm off really quick.
Oh yeah, sure, sure.
But yeah, so it is a strange history.
Yeah.
And in the beginning of the Mormon Church, there's a lot of you have to believe what Joseph Smith is saying
Hmm.
because all these events are happening when he's alone in the woods and things like that. And
Yeah.
a little side comment: the grove where he he is said to have had that vision,
Hmm.
they do tours there for Mormons.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, and it's apparently an incredibly spiritual place. My mother went there and she said that she felt like a golden glowing light in her chest. And it was just like one of the most spiritual experiences she had ever
Where is
had.
it?
It's in, I want to say it's in New York.
Okay.
It's in Upper New York because
Yeah.
moving to or Utah
Mhm.
became the stronghold when Mormons started getting persecuted. And
Mm.
they had to move west because they were literally getting driven out of every place they decided to stay.
Mm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't heard of the Grove, but
Yeah.
that makes sense because I'm not Mormon. But okay, that's cool that your mom had that experience there, though.
Yeah. And unfortunately, my own doubts don't allow me to like put too much faith in it, but I
Yeah.
hope she did. I hope maybe it is a powerful place. Maybe it's
Yeah.
like some other kind of thing, but who knows?
Yeah.
Who
Did
knows?
you ever did you ever question those stories when you were younger, like hearing those
I
about
feel like I feel like when I was a kid, like 6, 7 or younger, like no. I mean, David and Goliath is a cool story. Like
right,
Noah's
yeah.
Ark, like
Yeah.
whoever there's somebody in the lion's den too, where like
Oh,
he went and
Daniel,
did that's
yeah.
what I thought it was. Okay, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, those are fun stories for a
They are
kid,
fun. Yeah.
so but I think around the time that I had personal events happening
Mhm.
as a child,
Mhm.
my anger at everything and the hurt that I felt at everything didn't allow me to trust anything, whether
Mm.
it was my parents, my teachers, my religion.
Yeah.
So it kind of got a little walked out of me. I also read a lot of Harry Potter and fantasy.
Mhm.
And Harry Potter is pretty inherently anti-Mormonism. It's
Really?
like I mean, like the values that they teach in the books of Harry Potter are just a little bit more kind of like believe in anything. It's like anything can
Yeah.
happen. Your friends are always there for you no matter who they are.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more accepting than the
Mhm.
rigidity of Mormonism. So
Mm.
yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's I hadn't made that comparison before. Were Mormons ever like I know they're not in charge of like schools banning books, but like were you not allowed to read like certain but
So
obviously you
funny
still read Harry Potter, but
Funny enough, I wasn't allowed to read Harry Potter. The
okay.
only reason I was allowed to read Harry Potter is because I was at like a Cub Scout event,
Mhm.
and it was right after the first movie came out, and obviously that was a huge thing.
Yeah.
And these kids, we were out walking, were like, "Oh my God, I saw the new Harry Potter. It was so great."
Mhm.
And being a kid, I was like, "I saw the new Harry Potter too. It was
Yeah.
so good." And the Cub Scout like troop mom knew my mom was Mormon and was like, "Hey, I'm really shocked that you took him to go see that." And my mom decided that she would much rather me see Harry Potter than be known as a liar. So she
Okay.
just said, "Yeah, definitely," and then went to go see the movie, figure
Uh-huh.
out all of the places she needed to cover my eyes and ears at,
Uh,
and then
oh my
took me to go
God.
see it and covered my eyes and ears at like very specific parts. Like, yes,
Wow.
yes.
Whoa.
Uh-huh. And
That's cool.
there's a thing in Mormon culture where they actually do edit movies
Mm.
to not have the bad stuff. My mom has a story of going to BYU
Mhm.
and seeing a 30-minute cut of Bad Boys 2.
Oh wow. Oh wow. Jeez.
Yeah,
Like what's the point at that point?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez. Oh my gosh. That's like too much effort for what it's worth.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like soaking, too much effort for what it's worth.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, literally. Okay. Wow. I'm curious what part she covered your eyes and ears at. If you like, do you remember one example?
I know Fluffy, whenever Fluffy was on screen, the
Oh
three-headed
yeah.
dog,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that was too scary.
Mhm.
And then some of the magic casting, I guess she like thought I wouldn't pick up that
Yeah.
magic was a key part if I didn't see the spells.
Yeah.
I don't know. Parent
Okay.
logic, whatever.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay. Yeah. It's like hard to fully cover somebody's ears in a movie too, so you
Oh,
probably still heard every part of it.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I didn't
Yeah.
miss a thing. And then I became
Right.
super obsessed with it anyway. And she was like, well, I guess he's into this now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Darn. Yeah. No, I love Harry Potter. It's very very inspiring and big
Yeah.
fan. But
Very formative for sure.
yeah, totally. We grew up in a good generation and a good with a good timeline with the releases of the books and the movies, I think. So,
Oh yeah, the last movie actually came out like the week I graduated high school.
oh really? Nice.
Yeah, so I remember like just crying because it truly felt like the end of an era.
I know. I
Yeah.
sobbed at the last movie
Yeah.
premiere
Oh
too.
yeah.
Yeah, it was hard. I was a sophomore, I think. So,
Mm.
but yeah, I mean, sobbed in the movie, sobbed after the movie, and I was just like, what now? Like, what
Yeah.
are they gonna do?
What
What do I
else?
have to look forward to?
I
Like,
know. And I feel like no series has really scratched that itch since
no. And I mean, they're
Game of
doing
Thrones
these
got
like,
close.
yeah, they're doing these like Harry Potter. Wait, what got close?
Game of Thrones.
Oh, yeah, look, I didn't watch that as much. I haven't read the book. I've started reading the
Okay.
first book, but I
Yeah,
did not
yeah.
finish it.
I mean, it was not I feel like, as big of a cultural firestorm for so long, like Harry
Right,
Potter
yeah.
was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And the like spin-offs that they're doing, or not the spin-offs, but the whatever they're making like that new Harry Potter
The
series. The
remakes.
remakes. Yeah, I'm not excited
Yeah.
about that at all.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to support any new Harry Potter content
Yeah.
these days after what's been going on
Yeah,
with
yeah.
all Joanne.
Right. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so was it just the rebellion, I guess, that instigated your curiosity into like witchcraft, like or Wicca, like you said, or
I
uh,
think it was the fact that I read a ton of fantasy books. Like,
mm,
like I was an avid reader, and after a point, because of all of the different behavioral things, like I know I'm obviously bald, I have alopecia, so like that was a very difficult thing to kind of come to wraps. So like because of the need for emotional security,
mm,
my parents did buy me a lot of things to try to basically like keep me quiet, out of
yeah,
the way, things like that. So
yeah,
I read a ton of fantasy books. I loved reading things about like wizards and vampires, and
mm.
specifically, I remember a series called, oh, it was the House of Night series.
I read
And
that.
did
Yeah,
you really? You
I
were the
did.
first person I've ever met that read
Dude,
that. So
really, really quick, I actually have a House of Night like Oracle deck here.
no fucking way.
With Oracle cards, yeah, which I like never use it. Um, right
Oh
here.
my god, that is straight
Yeah.
up the House of Night.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
Dude,
I
oh
loved that
yeah.
series. Yeah.
Yeah, so like it's about like this girl who finds out that she's secretly a vampire, goes into this school,
Mhm.
and the school inherently is just doing element magic and like casting, like literally like Wicca essentially in this, and they worship Nyx, the goddess of night, and things like
Mhm.
that. And that really kind of sparked some questions because I'm like, man, this sounds cool as
Right.
fuck, like
Yeah.
this sounds so good.
Right.
So once I started exploring that, it kind of just was like, well, let's look into some of these, other things. And
Mhm.
I also am a big believer that the more you tell someone not to do something, the more curious they're going to get.
Yep.
So the more that the Mormon Church told me not to look into like new age religions or things like that, it was like, well, why not?
Right.
It's
Mhm.
like they say weed's the gateway drug. It's dare's the gateway drug. You lied to me and
Mhm.
said that weed was bad, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that book or those that book series was really fascinating. I
Mhm.
really loved it. It's been a long time since I read it, but
I know, I kind of want to read it now.
I know. Yeah, me too. I don't have any of the books. I think I borrowed them from a friend or something. But yeah,
Mhm.
it's they have a lot of elements in there. And yeah, fantasy for me too was like a big inspiration and motivator to just really honestly like open my imagination and begin to question things about like, well, why can't this be real? You know, like
Hmm.
why just because it's in a book. I mean, the Bible's a book too, you know.
Exactly.
So like written by humans.
Hmm.
Come on, Bella. So yeah, so I can kind of relate in just the sense that literature, or not like, you know, classic literature, but
Yeah.
books helped me to like just open my beliefs a little bit too.
Hmm. For
Um,
sure.
so what would you say to the younger version of yourself that was experiencing that religion and, you know, maybe felt unsatisfied with it or uncertain of where to seek other truths? Just what would you say to your younger self? What's come to mind?
Hmm. I feel like I would have just given him a stack of books and been like,
Mm.
here you go. Because younger me still had the tenacity to read all day and the
Yeah.
time to
Yeah,
read
right.
all day.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't want to give the standard, it gets better answer, but
Right.
like
Yeah.
it did. And I feel like it felt like eternity. It does feel like when you are in that situation or that belief and you are not believing
Mm.
and you're being forced to go every day, it literally starts to feel like prison or you're not in control of who you are,
Yeah.
which is a dehumanizing feeling in itself.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I can relate to that too. Just, you know, it never seemed like there was an end in sight, and at times it only seemed to be getting worse. And you know, and eventually like it does get better, you know, but you don't it's hard to realize that at the time, especially just being so young, and you know, you don't know till you know. So
Mhm.
um so did you have any like fears when beginning to explore the occult at all?
Yeah, because I was still living in the South.
Yeah.
Yeah, so even if like I was like around explicitly Mormon people,
Hmm.
around Baptists,
Yeah.
and things like that, and there is definitely a level of aggression
Mm.
towards alternate beliefs,
Yes.
especially ones that could be considered satanic.
Yeah.
So there's always been a little bit of that. And then it took me a long time, and it's still something I'm working on, but it's definitely gotten better, especially since we met.
Yeah.
But of
Cool.
like building that community who does believe in something a little bit more spiritual or
Mhm.
something that could be there.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's definitely been a journey for
Yeah.
sure.
It is a journey. It is a journey,
Yeah.
you know, and it really it can be an isolating journey, but you know, I am always propelled forward on my own journey by other people that I'm meeting too, you know, who align with where my beliefs are going, whether or not I know that's where they're going, if that makes sense, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
And just like hearing those truths and stuff. So really quick, I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. Did the Baptist church have as much of an impact on you growing up for those couple years as the Mormon church? Like, is there anything you want to say kind of about that? Because I know we haven't really kind of
Hmm.
checked in with that at all.
Yeah, the time in the Baptist church was very interesting because it was like in the period of learning to be myself after like the traumas that I was going through.
Mm.
So it was almost like I was trying to learn to be normal again, but also trying to fit in. I remember doing the whole like, all you have to do is say this prayer and you'll be saved. And I did a bunch of like religious retreats. Like I remember going down to Florida for Sold Out, which
Mm.
is
Oh.
yeah, it's like I've met a few people who went to that. It's like a thing that happens in Panama City Beach where like you go down and learn about God for a while and with a
Yeah.
bunch of other churches, and it's essentially like a way for to get the teenagers feeling like religion is cool and hip, and it also was a way for the church to make money because I
Mm.
did go, my town had several mega churches.
Mm.
And I feel like mine was definitely competing with what everybody called Six Flags Over Jesus,
Oh my God.
which was literally a church on the highway that had like a four-level play place, like you would see at McDonald's,
I've
and
seen
like
those.
tons of
Yeah.
flags. Yeah.
It's like,
And
what
I
goes
actually,
on there?
oh, I went to
Oh,
that church
yeah.
once. Yeah, because I had a friend in high school, and it's essentially like if you've seen this TV show Righteous
I
Gemstones.
have, yes.
Yes, so it's that little mega church where they're like putting on huge song and dance productions, full live
Mm.
band, light shows, lasers, all that.
Oh,
And
geez,
it's
yeah.
all for the glory of God,
Right, of
like,
course,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that was one thing I could never get behind because I grew up in a very liturgical, like traditional church where it was like almost like Gothic style architecture, pipe organs, a
Hmm.
choir, like robes. I was in the choir, and so you have these like different, these like awful collars that are just look terrible. It's very English, very Anglican,
Yeah.
and and I like that though. If I'm going to be practicing a spiritual practice, which I mean, most of my spiritual practices are like now in nature or in my room, but like
Hmm.
I liked the beauty of it. I just don't see the same beauty at these like mega churches.
Hmm.
Like there's not this level of, I mean, maybe there's a level of devotion, but there's something like holy really about like Notre Dame in
Hmm.
Paris, and is I think it's in Paris,
Yeah.
and all these other cathedrals, the history behind them, and they even had like the bones of the saints or something of the saint in the
Hmm.
altar, um, and then their catacombs too, like all of that in and of itself is always very mystical to me and very
Hmm.
like just had it has an energy about it. And when I was younger, I used to want to get like married in the church. I'm obviously not going to be doing that now, but just because of the beauty. I like the Gothic style architecture still.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like no matter what religion you are, churches, old churches, are cool as hell.
They are.
Like they look
Yeah.
so cool. Like a good stained glass window, man,
Mhm.
you
Oh
know.
yeah. Yeah,
But
it's
yeah,
beautiful.
I fully agree. I think that was a hard thing about switching to the Baptist church because Mormons are very solemn, organ,
Mm.
choir, like everybody's singing slow hymns together. And
Yeah.
that one, you're like singing full band, like drums, all this stuff, like
Yeah.
electric guitar, and it's
Right.
like who is this for? You
Right,
know?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just kind of always gave me the ick. I was like, I don't love I've been to a couple like with friends over the years, and I never did anything for me. It was like if I were gonna go to church, it would definitely not be this one.
Yeah,
Just
for
fine.
sure.
Yeah. So, but I don't go to any church right now. So,
Yeah.
um, okay. So hypothetical, because I know you don't have any kids right now, but would
Mhm.
you subject your children to the same religious upbringing that you had?
I wouldn't. And this is something I've thought about for a while because
Hmm.
like obviously you got to think about that sometimes, but
Yeah.
I would let my child decide what they want, like if they ask questions, answer the questions. Like I'm going
Right.
to have my own beliefs and if they want to ask questions about that, sure. But I also would provide them information once they're
Hmm.
old enough to understand like why can't they have a copy of the Bible and a copy of the Quran and a copy of,
The
all these other
Satanic Bible.
religions?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like they can have access to all that, recognize that there is a history and a
Mm-hmm.
purpose behind these, but then also make their own beliefs based on what phase of their life they're in, what works best for them, because they're
Yeah.
going to be living a very different life than what I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah. Which isn't a bad thing.
No, no.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think about that a lot too. And anytime I have asked this question, because I always ask it in the interviews, and some of the interviewees have had kids, some have not, most haven't. But it's all kind of the same answer of just like picking and choosing. And like I would love, ideally, like to be able to take my kid to travel too, like travel the world and see other cultures
Hmm.
firsthand and meet other people. And And like I think there was one interview I did. Well, I know there was one interview I did where this woman, her name's Abby, she has a daughter, I believe it's a daughter, and and she grew up Catholic but has since changed beliefs and stuff, and does the same sort of thing, where she like answers the questions and they say like good morning to the sun god and the moon god every night, and it's just very open and educational and supportive. There's
Mm-hmm.
not like, I mean, Abby I think identifies as well, she practices Hinduism now to an extent, and does like Sumerian astrology and stuff, but isn't enforcing those beliefs on her child.
Mm-hmm.
And and I just think that's such a wrong way to go about it. But at the same time, I do think that there is an importance to being um aware of and sort of open to like spirituality as a child, at least like knowing what it is,
Mm-hmm.
or knowing that there's a lot of different things out there. So
Yeah.
it's hard to know, like, I would want myself personally to have some like spiritual practices with my kid, even if I'm not taking them to church every Sunday or something. But like on Halloween, like we're like I always do this on my own, and I would definitely do it with my kids, but making like an ancestor altar and like doing, making offerings and talking to the ancestors, as if
Mm-hmm.
they're there, and doing things, maybe it's more pagan in origin, but doing things to celebrate like the changing of the seasons, or
Yeah.
going out in nature. Like this is just things that I would kind of do.
I
um
mean, I
yeah.
was just say, if you think about it, though, all of those things have inherent goodness in them outside of spirituality too. So,
True.
like,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with doing that because you're teaching them a reverence for what came for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And and then hopefully through those processes they would find like their own resonance with things, like
Hmm.
what works for them. So do you believe um okay, well we kind of just asked this question, but do you believe that it is important for kids, I kind of answered it myself, for kids to have a spiritual like exposure to
Yeah,
some
I
extent?
would say I would say to some extent, sure. I think I like your expression of it where it's like teaching them about reverence for nature, like there is a importance to the changing of seasons, and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. Teaching them things that give them a reverence for the earth
Mm-hmm.
or and the world around them without scaring them,
Yeah.
essentially, which is, I feel like, a big cornerstone of a lot of the current big religions. There's the edge of fear, which
Yes.
is not how shit operates,
Yeah.
like in a perfect world, like we're kind, we're open. Like,
Right.
even if you think about the Christian belief,
Mm-hmm.
their perfect world of Eden
Mm-hmm.
had no fear,
Mm-hmm.
so
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Which is interesting because like most Christian churches and like religions are very fear based,
Hmm.
and like most of the things, a lot of the interviewees that I've had have said like the worst thing about their religion was having that fear instilled in them.
Hmm.
And actually fearing like not going to hell, or going to hell, I mean. And I had that fear too. I would fear
Hmm.
certain things. I mean, not like so bad, but I did fear it, and it's like it's just a manipulation tactic. It's psychological manipulation, which I've
Hmm.
mentioned this in a lot of the other interviews too, just to get people to believe further and like stay in the church and blah blah blah. And like kids don't need that. Kids shouldn't be
No,
fearing going to hell. Nobody really should anyways, but like they're
no.
very impressionable as a kid, and like like there's just be a good person basically.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who had an incident when they were a kid where, like, they lied or they did something out, and then they're breaking down because they're so afraid that now they're going to burn in hell for eternity
Mm-hmm.
because they did what kids do. Like,
Right.
God, God's chill. I promise.
Yeah.
If your version of God and what you're telling me is real, bro is so relaxed, does not care. Does not care.
Exactly. God is cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had somebody else say that in an interview too, or her mom would tell her that, and I was like, "Yeah, that's great. Like, just God's
Yeah.
cool, like."
Hmm.
and he, she, they is.
Yeah,
It's funny. I don't know if you've seen the show Yellow Jackets.
I have. Yes, I
Okay,
love Yellow Jackets.
yeah. So in one of the episodes when they first like land in the forest, there's that
Hmm.
girl that's really religious. I forget, Lucy or something.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and she like there's this moment where she starts like crying or whatever because she like messed up in her piano lesson
Hmm.
recently, and her teacher like got mad at her, and she thinks that God is punishing her by crashing in the forest because she messed up in her piano lesson. And like
Hmm.
that's such an exaggeration, but honestly not that much too. Right, right.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
like, it's not that far fetched to me.
Right, exactly. Cause and to her, like it's so real. She's like, "Oh my God, like this is the karma of it." She doesn't say karma, but you know, this is
Hmm.
the consequences. And it's like that's literally how they want you to feel in a lot of these Christian churches. You know, which is
Hmm.
insane. It's
Yeah,
insane.
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you agree. I mean, I figured you would, but yeah. So, okay, so one kind of final question, and then we can get to anything else you may want to say, or we can wrap up or whatever. Is in this rapidly evolving world, do you think that religion having the same stronghold on individuals is beneficial for future generations? And let me put it kind of differently too. Like, do you see religion as being an important stronghold or an important foundation or just presence in the evolution of the world and in your perspective of how you see the evolution unfolding?
Yeah, for sure. So I think historically there has been a lot of progress
Mm-hmm.
and conquest that has happened with religion,
Mm-hmm.
I there's seems to have been sometimes that there's regression where like churches are working to kind of stamp out things they don't agree with, things like that. And I see that reflected today as well. I feel like most recently the Pope passed away, and he was saying some like kind of back and forth things, but I do feel like he was kind of pushing towards that evolution of Catholicism to be more accepting, more inclusive, more things
Mm-hmm.
like that. Um, Unfortunately, one of the cornerstones of the Bible and like Christian, at least in my experience, like Baptist and Mormon beliefs, is the unification of the world is a sign of the apocalypse.
Mm.
And in my head, the unification of the world is how we ascend to the next level as a species,
Right.
to how we can really move forward.
Mm-hmm.
So, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
it does feel like these days we are moving backwards a
Mm-hmm.
little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that with the deportations and the wanting to repeal gay marriage, things like that. Yeah, so there's just a disconnect the in the current state of the world and what we need to progress as a society. And it does feel like we're regressing back into that fear-based kind of puritanical belief system.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully people are realizing that this isn't going to work. I do hope for the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. And I do it's such a, it's yeah, you have to hope for the best, I do
Hmm.
see a lot of like the fear-based mindsets, and especially with like the politics now, which I'm not going to get into, but like
Yeah.
it just instills like people have a lot of fear, which rightfully so, but at the
Hmm.
same time that fear has an energy to it. And when
Hmm.
it's so many people in fear of these same things, like that belief builds momentum, right? And those things, it will eventually, it could makes it more likely to manifest.
Hmm.
And it really takes somebody who's dedicated and focused on shifting out of like the fear-based mindsets, regardless of what's happening around you, like to see the other side and to realize like, okay, no, like there is, I do believe that a lot of humans are waking up, not to be cliche, but are waking up and seeing like what's happening and just, the world, and wanting to ascend really rather than descend back
Mhm.
into, wherever, or just or regress. And, and it's easy to get sucked into the fear. Um and I think a lot of people who maybe don't have strong spiritual faiths in whatever it may be, or even strong in themselves, are maybe more likely to succumb to that fear. And I'm being very general. I know everybody's different. But it helps when you do have a belief in something,
Mhm.
to sort of transcend beyond these third dimensional fears that surround us and that we live in. Because if that's all you believe, and you don't really have faith in whatever, whether it be God, the sky daddy, or the universe, or
Yeah.
just an energy or something, or even faith in yourself, then it's, you become almost a victim to just getting wrapped up in this mindset and these beliefs. And so, I think that I agree, religion does still have a place, but I think that there needs to be a change in religions,
Mhm.
and evolution in religions itself. Bella, hey, do not. That's gonna knock stuff down. She's being a cat. And in order for that to have a healthy impact on society, more so than in a toxic, like, fear-based, like, programming that it's essentially, instilled for generations.
Mhm.
And so that's what I would like to see, like, in a perfect world. That's what I would
Yeah.
like to see. But will it happen? I don't know. Maybe not in our lifetime. But
Cross,
it's,
you know.
yeah, you never know. So, um, yeah. So, is there anything you want to kind of say to conclude, or any other thoughts coming to mind, or?
Yeah, no, I mean, if you're watching this and you're Mormon, don't be afraid to leave. Like, I know, like, it sounds silly, but there is a much brighter community that'll help you grow if you can give yourself the courage to exit the faith. And if you are watching this and you're not Mormon, don't ever do it. Don't buy into it. Don't
Don't
open the
drink the
door for the
Kool-Aid.
missionaries. Yeah, it's fine. Like, just read about it online.
Yeah.
Um, there is also for anybody that wants like a little bit of uh, additional reading. I'm trying to remember. Yes, so there is a website called the CESletter.org.
Okay.
And essentially what it is, it's a man who had a lot of doubts and he had a lot of questions. And he said, hey, like, I need these questions answered because my current faith as a Mormon is shook.
Mm.
And he wrote a very long paper to his pastor. And essentially, the pastor was like, oh, I'm not answering this. And also, like, you're out of the church.
Mm.
And so
Wow.
this guy is essentially like, this letter is incredibly sourced, talks a lot about the weirder parts of the religion, and is like, hey, what the heck is this? Give me
Mm.
an answer of why this is a thing.
Mm.
So yeah, that's the CESletter.org.
Okay. Awesome.
And it is definitely a very interesting read at the very
Cool.
least. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'll link that. I'll link that below the video too, so people can check that out. That
Mm,
sounds interesting. I'm gonna look at it too. So,
yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Snow, this has been such a good interview and so fun.
Yeah.
So,
I'm glad you could do it. Sorry to cancel last week. Not that
oh
everybody
no,
needs
it's
to do
okay.
that,
Yeah, it
but
was for good reason that you canceled
yeah,
last
yeah,
week.
yeah.
So, yeah. So no, and honestly, it kind of worked out better, like, with my schedule and stuff too. So
Nice.
it's been good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I appreciate your time and energy, and just telling your story and sharing all the things you want to share. And I hope that viewers enjoyed this too. If you made it this far to the end of the video, thank you so much. I hope you learned something. I hope you were inspired. I hope you got the wheels turning in some sort of way. Maybe learned something you didn't know yesterday. So I know I did.
Yeah.
Um,
And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
yes, thank you. I always forget to say that in my
Yeah,
own videos.
gotta be the
Yeah,
streamer, and click up here for the next
yeah.
video.
Right, exactly. Yeah, don't forget to like this video, give it a thumbs up,
Yeah.
subscribe to my channel if you're not subscribed already, and stay tuned for more interviews. I do have another one coming up sometime this month, hopefully maybe in June, but I'm trying to keep the ball rolling, get interview as many people as I possibly can from all different walks of life. It's cool to like have somebody who's with a Mormon background on here now. I would love to get like Jehovah's Witness or Muslim or Jewish people or whoever. Anybody that wants to share your story feels so inclined. Like, let's make it happen. So Snow, again, thank you. This has been great, and I will connect with you soon. So,
Awesome.
all right,
Bye.
bye bye.